Yesterday's decision by the 36 state governors in Nigeria to ban interstate movement for a 2-week period seems to be a right ray of hope in the fight against COVID-19. This struggle has been fought on majorly individual basis in terms of what the states have done before now. But right now, we're being joined on the program by Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ekiti State and Chairman of Nigeria's Governors Forum. And in the course of this conversation, we'll try to find out what else the governors may have up their sleeves in this matter of life and death called COVID-19. Welcome to the program, Governor Fayemi.
Good morning, Governor. Welcome to the program.
Morning. Good to be on your program.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Well, for the next 1 hour, we're going to engage you. And, I just want you to relax. It's not a JAMB examination. It's a conversation. Yesterday you had, the 36 state governors had a teleconference. And at the end of it, you decided that you advised, rather, that there should be a ban on interstate travel for the next additional 14 days. What exactly does that mean? Does it mean that you will be recommending to the federal government that there should be a complete lockdown of Nigeria, as some people have suggested? Or you are just saying that interstate travel should be banned and then, essential services should be allowed?
Thank you very much, Ruben, for offering us the opportunity for clarification. This is not a first meeting that we're holding via the web. As a matter of fact, in the last 6 weeks, this is our 6th virtual meeting in which almost all of the governors in Nigeria were present. And our decision yesterday was informed largely by what everyone can see as a clear and present danger. And it is not a complete and total lockdown of Nigeria. No. It is a proposal to the federal government, Mr. President, and its main advisors, the Presidential Task Force, on what we see based on our experience. And let's be clear. When NCDC announces results every day of the trajectory of this unfortunate virus that has afflicted our country and the globe, they talk about what is happening in states. There is no federal victim or patient of COVID-19. There are patients in Oyo, in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Kano. So that in and of itself makes this a state challenge as much as a Nigeria challenge. And that's the reason why we've met consistently and also interacted quite actively with the Presidential Task Force. And what we're basically saying is that based on our own experience, the evidence before us, and facts that are available, imported transmission of COVID-19 would appear to have subsided, if not completely stopped. However, community spread clearly has started. And what has aided community spread more than anything else is the unrestricted movement of people from the epicenters, Lagos and Abuja, in spite of the lockdown in those places. And I can give you numerous examples, not least from my own state. Our third patient, who unfortunately passed away yesterday, came into Ekiti in the middle of the night from Lagos and ended up in a private hospital without disclosing any ailment to them for a delivery. It was in the context of a cesarean section that was performed on her that it became clear that she was a COVID-19 positive patient. And she had already been in contact with about 70 people cumulatively. Those she had been in contact with had been in contact with other people. And this is the story for the bulk of what we had seen in the last 3 weeks. And that is precisely why we decided yesterday that we would propose. It's not in our place. Of course, we're responsible for our state, and we can actually lock down our state. But we felt for us, cooperative federalism is the way to go. So we proposed to the federal government that it would be good in places where you cannot afford a complete intra-state lockdown. And there are reasons sometimes for us not to really promote intra-state lockdown, because the evidence does not suggest in any state that we are having community spread. However, the evidence suggests that people are moving, and Nigerians are very migratory. We all know that. So what to do is to stop movement from state to state and then reduce the potentiality for spread. And internally, coupled with interstate boundary lockdown that we're proposing, we're also proposing that we should not encourage public gathering of any nature. Churches, mosques, political gatherings, funeral and wedding parties, you name it. Anything that could encourage, even schools. Our proposal is that we should still lock down public gatherings of any sort inside, have a curfew overnight, and have intrastate movement that would not result in a complete lockdown of our state. However, barring essential commodities, food, drugs, beverages, petroleum products, agricultural products, no passenger vehicle should be allowed into any state in the course of these 2 weeks. That's our proposal to the federal government. And we met with the federal government team last night, led by the vice president, and we tabled our proposals to them.
Governor, thank you for the clarification that you have just given, that this is not a complete and total lockdown, but rather a proposal to the federal government, which is essential. Thank you for that. Now, you pointed out something, which is that community transmission, of course, is what we are seeing ever since we imposed a ban on travel in and out of Nigeria. And that is what we are trying to stop here. Now, yesterday at the meeting, you made a comment on the fact that there's literally been, or essentially rather, zero testing in Ekiti states, but really and truly, this is also down to your numbers, whereby I believe you've only had 4 cases so far and 1 death. Rest in peace to the lady who lost her life. Now, what we do know is that going forward, testing is necessary in every state, and every state has to ramp up their testing capacity. I understand that you do plan on also partnering with the private sector to try and see how we can get GenExpert machines that we use for tuberculosis testing to be used for COVID-19 testing. But can you tell us more on how you intend on ramping up your testing capacity in Ekiti states?
Okay, well, this is not something limited to Ekiti state. We have also been discussing with the federal authorities. It's clearly that testing is the key to reducing this, because it's only when you test that you know who to isolate and who to let go, and how to protect and address those who are positive. And clearly, when you look at the numbers, less than 9,000 tests, more than 700 positive. I don't want to jump to any conclusion. I'm not a doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist. But purely dealing with numbers, 9,000 tests, almost 800 positive, tells me that if you extrapolate from that to our 200 million population. Yes, some people are being discharged as they get better. It points clearly to the fact that we may end up with 20 million. I don't want to scare anyone. So that's close to 10% of our population. But even if you reduce that to 5% of the population, because right now, what happens is that NCDC tests those who have either been abroad or been in contact with those who have been abroad. And if you even voluntarily, now I think only in Lagos and in Abuja have they moved to the level of community testing in the country. So, and our position is, if you have challenges of testing in Akwa Ibom samples are sent to Irua. For you to drive to Akwa Ibom to Irua takes 16 hours. And when you get it there, it takes another 2-3 days for you to get the result of the test. Even in Ogun, that is very close to Lagos, governor has consistently complained that it takes almost a week to get results of their samples from Lagos, which is why Ogun State has now procured a molecular laboratory in order to conduct their own tests. And that is what we have proposed to NCDC, to the federal government, that we are determining the states to ensure that we all have testing capabilities. That way, we can also test at random and not wait just for people who have traveled or people who have been in contact with those who have traveled. And that's what informed what we are doing in our partnership with the private sector to put a GeneXpert machine here converted to a COVID-19 testing machine.
Well, Governor Fayemi, I will need another clarification. In the statement that was issued after the 6th teleconference of the governors yesterday, there was a comment about the need to decentralize Nigeria's response to COVID-19. Is that a subtle criticism of the presidential task force? Is that an indication that there has not been enough synergy between the federal government and the states? And I ask that question because the statement went further to indicate that the governors have now proposed the setting up of regional committees comprising state commissioners of health who will be meeting on a regular basis to ensure that the governors are working together and adopting the same strategy. Now, setting up another committee, is that not an extra bureaucracy when the state governments should be focusing on the urgent challenges of testing, contact tracing, setting up isolation centers? What do you think?
Well, Ruben, the truth of the matter is that we can always improve on synergy and coordination. And I hinted earlier that for us at the Governors Forum, we're more interested in cooperative federalism than competitive federalism. We're not competing with the federal government. And this is something that is an existential threat to all of us Nigerians. So how to resolve it is what Nigerians are interested in, not who resolves it. And the federal government has a national, has a federal approach to it. We have a state approach to it. What we need is a national approach to it. And national approach to it would also require levels. You cannot manage this crisis centrally from Abuja. It would not work. That's one. Number two, we also need peer pressure on ourselves. And it is best done by those who are within contiguous arena to one another. So states that are contiguous, that share boundaries, that have ethnic and cultural affinity, they're likely to be able to address these issues a lot more closely and a lot more directly than NCDC. NCDC is clearly doing a lot of good work. Many of us admire Dr. Ihekwezu and his team, but it is also clear to us that NCDC is overwhelmed. NCDC is biting more than it can chew. So we are actually helping NCDC and the Presidential Task Force out by suggesting that henceforth we want our own teams, the commissioners for health, our epidemiologists in the zone, to do this. And that's what we did yesterday. Apart from myself and my vice chairman, the chairman of all the zonal governors forum, Southeast, Northwest, Northeast, North Central, Southwest, they met. They were all in the meeting that we had with the vice president and the chairman of the Presidential Task Force. So basically, we're all in this together and we must fix it together.
Governor Fayemi, thank you for that particular clarification. Now, yesterday, something else happened within your state. You ordered the release of 30 prisoners from Ado-Ekiti Correctional Center, which is a great move, and it was also a move, of course, in the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19. Now, you also mentioned that these people who were released are also going to be receiving palliative measures from the government, which is also another great move, considering the fact that just last week on this show, we actually did bring up the question as to whether people who are released from correctional centers were going to be receiving palliative measures. How many people do you plan on releasing? Who are the demographics of people that you are also releasing? And how much capacity do you also have within the state to provide the palliative measures that are necessary to these people coming out of correctional centers?
Well, thank you very much. The logic to releasing people from correctional centers is not limited to us. As a matter of fact, it's something that the federal government has also shown an interest in and has supported. I must give some credit to the federal government for that, because we have so many people in detention in Nigeria, in our correctional facilities, that are, some of them have been awaiting trial for much longer than it would have cost them if they had been convicted for the offense. Some have spent 2 years for an offense whose maximum sentence was probably 12 months. So we felt one of the ways to decongest the prisons and also to address what crowding leads to. And anybody who has been to a correctional facility in Nigeria will really know which one for even his enemy. The way the place is crowded, the unhygienic conditions that you find there, and quite difficult circumstances in which they exist. I wouldn't say live. So that's what we were trying to address with that. And the 30 people that we released are also people that we are attending to by way of providing support, palliative, and in the form of food, and also in the form of some limited stipends.
Well, I read a think piece you wrote recently, turning adversity into opportunity at the subnational level. And my favorite phrase in that your piece is how we can make how the strongest link is the weakest link, something like that. We're only as strong as our weakest link. And in that regard, in that article, you were talking about focusing on the elderly, the poor and the vulnerable, the handicapped, and all of that, and how we can protect those people as we combat COVID-19. And I would like to throw back that statement to you in terms of this. How is the Ekiti State government trying to protect that weakest link, the most vulnerable, in the face of COVID-19?
Well, Ruben, I'm glad you referred to my piece recently in the papers. I would actually like to dwell on that quite a bit, if you'd allow me. But let me answer your question first. As you may be aware, we have consistently been very passionate about protecting the weak and the vulnerable in our state. In my first time in office, you may recall that Ekiti was the the first state that ever put in place a social security benefit scheme for the elderly. And I was paying our elderly indigent population 5,000 naira monthly, ever before we started the conditional cash transfer at the national level. There was no APC government at the time I was talking about. This was under President Jonathan's administration when I was governor in Ekiti before I went to Abuja. And the idea, and we actually enacted a law for this. We were paying about 25,000 elderly citizens that were over 65 without any person looking after them. And we lived quite long in Ekiti. And that's a challenge. Not all of our people have people looking after them. It's either the children are not at home or the children themselves are unemployed. And we felt we needed to protect them in their twilight years, and we did that consistently for 4 years. We were also supporting, we have our broader social democratic program of free health for the elderly, free health for pregnant women, free health for people with physical disability, and free health for children under 5. We also had a free education program right up to SSS 3. Some of these things have been brought back when I returned to Ekiti as governor in October 2018. And outside of what you're noticing, which the federal government is doing, the conditional cash transfer that they're paying to people that they consider poor and vulnerable in the social register, we started this way back when I returned to office in October 2018, and we've continued it, just as we did when I was governor in the first time. So that's what we do. And the point I was making in that article is that now that we seem to be faced with a new normal in which oil is looking very vulnerable and our dependence on it is quite under serious threat, we need to be looking at other opportunities that would then allow us to focus public spending more on social welfare issues and social investment, the elderly, the poor, the vulnerable, the pregnant women, the under 5 children, so that questions of maternal mortality, child mortality, human capital investment become central to governance, not just the idea now where we all have to live from hand to mouth, and once we get federal allocation and we add it to our internally generated revenue, the bulk of what happens in our various states is just payment of salaries. We then have to look for creative way to bring about infrastructure and then support other segments that are not salaried workers. And that was the point in the article. And that this is an opportunity. Yes, it is an existential threat, but it's an opportunity for us to really think out of the box and to press the reset button in our country and then say, we've been talking diversification for as long as one can go blue in the eye, but we haven't quite gotten there. We're making progress. Otherwise, some of the food that we're moving around and that we're sharing, they're locally produced, and we must commend people. But I was saying in that article that our state must now do more. We're the one that has the land. There is no federal government land. We must now do more to invest in agriculture, turn our state to destination for those who are ready for large-scale farming, who can also offer support to our local farmers who have consistently been subsistent farmers before now, and that we must help with land clearing, we must help with provision of seedlings, we must assist with outgrower scheme, and also assist with ensuring that there is an offtake for the produce from the farm to the market, and we must help with improving feeder roads, between our farms and markets. Those are the arguments I put up in that piece that you referred to. And I believe it's the way to go, really. Oil is a wasting asset, and ultimately we can see that there's no future for oil.
Well, Governor Fayemi, sorry to interrupt you at this point. We need to take a short break on the morning show. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the morning show. Here on Arise News, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, the governor of Ekiti State and also the chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum, is still here with us on the morning show, looking into the fight against COVID-19 and also the way forward. Dr. Fayemi, thank you for staying with us. And before we went on a break, you were speaking about looking inwards and the fact that this is now what we have to adjust to, and there is going to be, or there already is, a new normal. Now, you also spoke of the contributions that Ekiti State can make, namely within the agricultural sector. I wanted to ask you, Governor, what else do you believe post-COVID-19 that Ekiti State can bring to the table?
Well, I've spoken about agriculture. We're known for that. We're an agrarian state. This is what our ancestors have done, but it's time to refocus agriculture from its subsistence past to agribusiness. That's one thing we bring to the table. In addition to that, we're also known for another thing in Nigeria. We are a state that is known to have a passion for education. So for us, the knowledge economy is very key. We need to be able to translate our passion, our love for education to some form of wealth via technology. And that is a major priority for us in the state. We have a knowledge city program. We have interaction with our universities that we believe we can turn around. But more importantly, we have a focus on skills development and technical education for our youngsters. Because what this has also pointed out is that it is the skills that would survive in this new normal economy. Look at us. Look at us in the Governors Forum. We've held 6 teleconferences sitting behind our desks in our various states. In the past, I would not be talking to you like this. You would insist that I come over to Lagos to your studio, and you will move all these economies from our states, carrying all this entourage to Abuja on a monthly basis for a 2-hour meeting. Now, that's not likely to be the case in the aftermath of COVID-19. And in our states, for example, we are focusing on broadband technology, wiring up all our states to make sure that even the way of work, the future of work in the so-called fourth industrial revolution is going to change. And we must be able to adapt ourselves to that. And we believe that Ekiti is at an advantage because we have a highly populated, highly educated population. And it should not just be education for its own sake. It must be education that we can translate into skills development that can then provide jobs for our people, because jobs is going to be critical to making a difference in this challenging period that we're entering.
Yes, Governor Fayemi, yes, I'm glad you already talked about the future of work, because I was going to ask you what scenarios do you envisage, not just locally, but also globally. But since you have addressed a part of it, I'll move on to another question. And this has to do with the future of the states, or rather the present and the future of the states in Nigeria. Now, oil price now, Brent crude is down to about $19. There is a price war in the oil industry that has created a crisis in that sector, combined with the crisis we have with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have had guests on this program who have said, look, FARC allocations to the states is already impaired. And that, we may reach a point whereby states will just have to learn how to be innovative and creative. Now, we'd like to know, was this part of the conversation yesterday when the governors met? How do states survive if, there is an economic disaster and the handouts from Abuja do not work? And Ekiti State is not one of the most buoyant states. So in Ekiti, what are you thinking about? And what is the conversation among you and your colleagues about how states can survive now and post-COVID-19?
Well, thank you, Ruben. Well, the economic impact of COVID-19 and the way forward is a permanent item on the agenda of the Nigerian government. So we are always discussing ways to do that. Don't forget, we are members of the National Economic Council, which the Vice President chairs. And there's a committee of the National Economic Council that has been saddled with the responsibility of looking at different scenarios of reorganizing our economy. As part of that, states are also in the process of reviewing their own budgets for 2020 to take into account new realities that we're dealing with. This was a budget that was predicated on an oil price benchmark of $57, almost $60. Of course, you know what has happened, and we need to be looking at what that means for the state and how that would impact on our local economy. But what comes from Abuja, and I'm sure you know this, you probably just called it that as a way of describing it. States do not regard what comes from Abuja as a handout, because it's not. We are federating units in Nigeria. What goes into the federation account belongs to the federal and the state, and in the context of the state, to the local authorities superintended by the state. So we don't consider it a favor done to us. However, the challenge that we all must pay serious attention to is how to grow that federation account, particularly the non-oil aspect of it. And that relates to the point I made earlier about agriculture. People would always eat. We have seen that people may choose either by force or by force majeure not to go to, not to use oil. And part of what has resulted in what is happening to oil prices around the world is that aviation is out. Nobody is flying anywhere, so there's no need for jet fuel. Even those of us who are at home were locked down in our various homes in all the countries of the world. So, and the factory of the world, China, is not producing at full steam. So really, oil is just on the high seas, begging for people to buy, and no one is looking in that direction. Automatically, it's a demand and supply mechanism at work. The important point is states would have to readjust. And part of that readjustment is being very honest with our population and letting them know that it is now business unusual. Our youth, we need to drive them into more creative, more self-generating initiatives rather than waiting for jobs. We've been saying it forever. We had this situation in 2008, 2009. Oil prices went down. We had it in 2015, 2016, when President Buhari just came in. But we soon forgot about, well, don't let me say forgot about it. We soon played it down once oil prices returned to $60, $70, and things were looking a bit good for oil. But thankfully, this government has also embraced agriculture in the process, and some of what we're seeing is the byproduct of that. In my state, I mean, if it had not been for COVID-19, Dangote Rice is setting up a mill here. Promasido Cowbell is working in Ekiti to help us revive our dairy farm. We have people setting up cassava processing mills. So we know that there is a guaranteed market for whatever is produced on our farm, and we can encourage farmers to return to the land in order to get value for whatever they produce and not wait for this to be rotten after they've produced it. So I think the reality for states is we cannot depend on oil rent. And I said it just a couple of days ago that by June, we're not even sure we're going to get anything from oil rent. Our revenue from Abuja, from the Federation account, will probably have to depend on other things that is in the non-oil component of the Federation account.
Governor, certainly we cannot depend on oil rents. And to be honest with you, looking at our Dutch disease even more seriously now, we know that we are forced to look at other situations or other new realities that we have to adopt or propose. Now, I'd like to take you back to, or follow up rather, on what I'd asked you before, because you mentioned education and you spoke quite proudly about Ekiti State and education. Dr. Fayemi, how are you using technology to transform education within Ekiti State as well? Are you digitizing your universities, etc.? Is there anything you can tell us in that particular regard?
Oh, yes, there's a lot that I can tell you in that regard. Again, if I had to harken back to my old days, my first time in office, everybody knew of our laptop for child in Ekiti State, provided for our secondary out of a partnership that I entered into with Samsung. But we are revisiting that model now by making sure that what we have is computer labs, not individual laptops for our students, and ensuring that we also partner with institutions that can train our teachers via the web. We're entering into partnership with an institution called Bridge Education Service, which has been working in Edo State and also in Lagos to retrain our teachers and ensure that that can be utilized for our basic education, our primary school children. In our university, you heard what I said earlier about broadband access in the state, because we believe that this is critical to even enabling the universities to embark on online courses and encourage them to utilize computing for a lot of what they're doing. Look at this period now. We have School on Air program in Ekiti State for our basic schools and our secondary schools, those who are stuck at home. But it would have been most preferable to me if we were to conduct those classes online rather than via the radio, which is what we're using. But we don't even have broadband access enough to be able to do that, which is why we're focusing our energy on broadband access for all, because we don't think this is a privilege anymore. The new world that we're dealing with, we must make it available as it has become obvious to all of us in the world.
Well, Governor Fayemi, before we end this, we still have some 15, 16 minutes. I would like to ask you a couple of political questions. But before I get to the political questions, let me draw your attention to the social crisis that we've been having with the lockdown, particularly in this part of the country. We have some characters who call themselves 1 million boys, harassing people, disturbing people on the streets. We also have those who call themselves Awawa boys, who have been going from house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood, creating some kind of disturbance. Now, what is the experience in Ekiti State? Do you foresee the possibility of that kind of social unrest? And if not, what steps are you taking to prevent it? And going beyond that, there are persons who have asked the question. A few months ago, you and your colleagues in the Southwest, you were defending the Western Region Security Network, also known as Amotekun, with people being harassed now, particularly in Lagos and Ogun State. Some people have been asking the question, where is Amotekun to offer the protection that is supposed to be part of its mandate?
Thank you very much, Ruben. Well, Amotekun is alive and well. It's been distracted a little bit because of our focus on COVID-19. As you may have been aware, we signed it into law in all our states, and we are now at the phase of recruitment. There's recruitment, there's training, there's deployment. And we are also synergizing with the law enforcement agency, the Nigerian police. Excuse me. We have had a number of meetings with the federal authorities as a result of the Western Nigerian Security Network. And I would like to think we're now largely on the same page, and we're also working with them in the implementation of community policing. Oh, you're right. Amotekun ought to have been very useful under the current circumstances. But I think it's better for us to conduct its recruitment and training properly so that these people can really be of benefit in the community, because they're going to serve in their own local community. Just like the recruits by the Nigerian police will also serve in their own local government. That's what's happening to Amotekun. People should not entertain any fear. The governors are still fully committed to citizen security and protection, which we consider one of our primary responsibilities as governors. But addressing the larger question of social unrest that you raised, we do not have it on the level that I have read about or that my colleagues have spoken about in Lagos and Ogun State. But that's probably understandable. The population is a little bit more out there than in Ekiti. But we have also taken some measures that might have attenuated that. Quite apart from the fact that I would like to think that our people here are more generally law-abiding. You know, we're rustic people, we're Araoke, as you Lagosians will say, and we tend to be more cooperative with our governments. We do have challenges here. People try to evade our lockdown. People raise concerns, but I think they've come to an understanding that this is for their own sake. It's about their own safety and well-being. And there's generally a much more receptive audience here in our state. However, I believe when it comes to hunger vid, we have to address that. And that's one of the things we've done. We've made sure that we've tried as much as possible to allow the palliatives we've offered to spread to the nooks and crannies of our state, not just to the indigent and the vulnerable, but also to artisans and people who have lost their daily income as a result of the lockdown. So we've had calls to make it available to the NURTW, the Drivers Union, the Tailors Association, the market women. We've provided it for them. We've even provided for our friends in the opposition, because this for us is one crisis that we all must deal with on a completely bipartisan basis. So BDP Secretariat, other secretariat, we've made our palliatives available to everybody in our state. And it's still not gone round enough. We're still providing palliatives just to reduce and calm our people down and provide for them as much as possible within the context of the resources available to us. That's how we've addressed that. But when you have young, agile men and women locked down, there are bound to be challenges. We've had rise in domestic violence, for example, in Ekiti. That's one issue we're dealing with. And it's an issue that not a lot of us are paying enough attention to. We're receiving reports of battered wives and battered girlfriends and all that in our state, because people are locked up in the same place and there's increasing tension all around. So our courts are dealing with those issues. We're having people arrested. We're providing safe houses for women. Even in the context of this, it's COVID-19 we're dealing with, but there are fallouts from COVID-19 that we also must address.
Governor Fayemi, thank you for those clarifications. It's actually very gladdening to hear that safe houses are being provided for women and also, I assume, men as well within the state that are surviving or being victims of right now some sorts of abuse or another, mainly gender-based violence that we're speaking of here. Now, many people have expressed the fact that really and truly a lot more people may die from the economic effects of COVID-19 than the virus itself. And I just wanted to ask you, looking ahead, medium term, short term, how long do you see this lockdown going on in your state in particular? Do you see yourself reopening certain parts of the economy over the next few weeks? What plan do you have in place?
I think we have to be guided by facts and evidence. If we see what is normally referred to as a flattening, I personally don't even believe that we have reached any peak. And we may not even reach a peak till maybe June or July in our own setting here in Nigeria. It's only when we test more that we would get factual, evidence-based information that we can then use to address our situation. There may also be some truth to the fact that, to the perception or opinion that Africans may not be as much under a threat as we've noticed in other parts of the world. Although in those parts of the world, we've also seen that a lot of Black people are susceptible to the effects of COVID-19 and even die more than Caucasian. But coming to our own situation here, if we can lock down in a very, very firm manner, particularly what we have proposed on the interboundary movement, it may be possible for us to really go back to our normal situation, or at least close to normal, in the next month. That's my sense. But we really have to be guided by the facts. We can't treat this on an emotional basis. Otherwise, we will get ourselves into trouble. Some of us are concerned with what is happening in Kano, and Nigerians generally are looking in that direction. Is this the new epicenter? And what do we do in light of some of the maybe cultural practices that may even conduce to the spread of the virus? So those are issues we need to deal with. Testing needs to be ramped up. Facilities, training needs to be provided for our health workers and protection, particularly for health workers. And then government needs to be firm in its management of these and better coordinated, better synergized with the end users and the states in this regard.
Well, Dr. Fayemi, we have a question on our Twitter feed, which is at Arise TV on Twitter. And there is someone who is asking you a question from Twitter saying, "Sir, what are the plans being laid down for students, most especially the university students that have been sent home and are doing nothing?" Salem Kismet, that's the gentleman's name. So that's a question from our social media platform for you.
Well, for university students, I have two responses to that question. Ruben, you recall a gentleman called Isaac Newton. It was during a plague like this in 1660 or thereabouts, I can't remember the precise date, that he hunkered down in his home in the village and developed some of the theories that won him accolades. By the time he returned, he was a student at Cambridge then, but there was a plague at the time, and he spent his time being locked down, producing more interesting insight into theory of relativity, into many mathematical theories. I'm not, of course, by this suggesting that all of us would be equally endowed to do that. The point I'm making is that there's a lot more mature, grown-up students. We're not talking about elementary school students. We're not talking about secondary school students. We're talking about university students. They can become a lot more creative and deal with that. But there is also an existential crisis. Some of them will throw it back at me that, okay, you want us to do that. Where is the electricity? Where is the internet? And where is this or that? Yes, we don't have all of the facilities that we should have as a country to encourage our youth to be more creative and productive. But as I argued in my piece, Ruben, in every adversity, there's an opportunity. And I know there are many students, university students, that would have positive stories to tell of this period, of concrete steps they took in order to liberate themselves from the pangs of poverty because they put their knowledge and their creativity to use. But there also has to be a structured engagement for them. And in all areas, we need to be looking at how we can engage them in agricultural technology, in support services, in internship. But work is not even going on in many places to have made this possible. But I do think it's an area we need to focus attention on. The questioner is correct.
Dr. Fayemi, thank you for your response to that. Now, we're rounding up this conversation in just a matter of minutes, and I'd like us to go back to the point on opening up economies, and you were saying that if we're being hopeful, maybe within the next month. Now, a lot of countries and cities around the world that are doing so have increased their testing capacity to the point where they kind of know what to expect when they open up their economies. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Fayemi, over the next month, how many tests do you plan on carrying out within Ekiti State? And do you plan on adopting certain measures like Lagos State did with a house-to-house search to test for more possible symptomatic patients of COVID-19?
Well, one of the ways we are trying to address this, the modular laboratory that we're trying to get in the state, we are getting with these 10,000 cartridges that we feel if we undertake around about 10,000 tests, which is a lot for a state. We haven't even done 10,000 tests in Nigeria. We've done roughly 8,000, 9,000. So I think we must get to a point where we're able to test 10,000 a day over the next few months in order to be absolutely crystal clear that we are not allowing community transmission. But, you know, I don't believe that we have to wait till we've tested everybody before we open up our economy. I don't also believe we have to do what they did in Ghana, where the president has just opened up the economy as well. I think we need to be careful. We need to do a few more tests and then review our situation as we go along.
Well, Governor Fayemi, well, at this point, we just have to thank you. I would have loved to ask you a number of political questions. One, your role in the Oshiomhole crisis, which looks like it's been resolved now, and then the conflict with the traditional council in Ekiti State. But unfortunately, we do not have much time. And I would have loved to ask you about your ambition for 2023. What's your next plan after being governor in Ekiti State? But unfortunately, we don't have the time for all of that. Maybe we'll invite you again, and I hope you will oblige us again. But thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.